Hello and welcome to another video in the series Archaeology in Islam. My name is Dan Gibson, and today we want to answer a question that several viewers have asked or have commented on. Now, I'm in a bit of a dilemma because there are two things that I would like to do. I want to bring this series, Archaeology in Islam, to an end, as I have presented my research in this area of archaeology. Looking at the actual stones and looking at the actual evidence. In this series, we have actually wandered away from this topic a little bit, so I'd like to bring it to a conclusion with this video as the last in the series. In its place, I want to start a new series. Actually two new series. The first would be an attempt to answer questions that people have been asking. We'll call that Q&A. Questions and answers, and it could cover all kinds of different topics that people have brought up that are interesting, and I will try to deal with those. The second series would focus solely on the Qibla question. In each episode, we will look at a couple of different mosques and talk about the setting of the Qibla wall and how that mosque came to be, and we'll learn about that. We'll start in a couple of weeks with that series. Now, for this video, I have people asking me a question. It's come up again and again, and they say, what's all the fuss? Aren't all three monotheistic religions the same? Now, some years ago, when the Crown Prince Hassan of Jordan, was visiting universities around the world, giving talks on how the great three monotheistic religions were all similar, he was arguing that they should be united as one religion. Now, if you're talking about formal, organized religion, maybe there's something to it. I don't know. But if you're talking about people who are careful to follow the teachings of the prophets, then I do not think it's possible to unite the three monotheistic religions together. So in this video, I want to give you my opinion and my understanding of what they are. In my mind, at least, those who truly follow the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad follow a totally different path than those who follow only the Old and the New Testaments. There are a lot of people around who call themselves followers of Jesus, and they're not just some organized religion. They're people who are trying to follow the teachings of Jesus. So in this video, I want to share with you some of the differences between those who follow Muhammad and those who follow Jesus, at least how I see it. So it's a little bit off of topic today, but I want to look at this because people have been asking. First, there is the topic of judgment. I put this first because the prophets put it first. The prophet Moses describes to us a world that God created. And as anyone would expect, when God created something, it was good, it was complete, it was perfect, just like the Creator God. Moses introduces us to a perfect world, a perfect man, a perfect woman, and a perfect marriage. Moses clearly tells us that in this state there was perfection, and God would visit them, and he would talk with them, and there was a relationship between man and God. That's all in the first book of Moses, in the book of Genesis, the opening couple pages of the Bible. A perfect world, a perfect man, perfect woman, perfect marriage, and a relationship with God. This is the first difference I see with Islam. In Islam, Adam and Eve are placed on the world, and they do the best they can, and at the end of their life, they're judged on how they did. This is not what Moses taught us. Moses teaches us that the perfect world was ruined by Satan, who tempted both Adam and Eve, and they both sinned and did wrong, and they allowed sin into the perfect world, and it ruined our perfect world. God reacted to that by judging Satan and Adam and Eve. Judgment happened at the Garden of Eden. What was perfect and complete and good was ruined. Adam and Eve were to blame, and they had disobeyed God. They had dishonored God, and so they had brought shame on God, and so judgment came, and they were cast out of the presence of God. Imagine if you badly dishonored your family. What would happen? Would you be cast out? That is the picture we have here in the book of Genesis. Adam and Eve and their children and all mankind since, we have been living as cast out of God's presence. This is what followers of Jesus believe. And ever since that time, man has wanted to get things right with God. What is interesting is that Moses teaches us that perfection was lost. That's what all religions around the world are trying to do. They're trying to restore some sort of relationship with God that was at the beginning. So Moses tells us that we live in a world under judgment. The world is full of sin. It's full of evil people doing evil things. People all around us are disobeying God. I like to think of a picture of a school playground. The children are in the playground, and the teacher tells the children, you can go out and play now in the yard, but you must stay within the fence. Maybe half the kids will stay in the fence, but some of them will want to go to the other side of the fence. And they'll try to convince the others that it's more fun to play in the fields, or to play in the forest, or to go out and play on the road. They've been told not to, but the teacher hasn't necessarily told them why. Just don't go beyond the fence. So some kids will ask, why? What's wrong? It's more fun, and so forth. That is what is happening in the world today. God has set limits for us, but people are rebelling against God and going beyond the limits that he has set. And it's not just doing things. Jesus brought a message that it was quite a shocking message. He told us, even if you look at a woman and lust after her, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. You can sin in your mind, not just in your outward actions. You see, humans all over the world struggle with rebellion. Rebellion against God, rebellion against authority, rebellion against people and parents. We're not just good people, we are always rebelling. So all of these religions have started up to deal with this issue, and all of them fail. None of them will bring you to a relationship with God, even Islam. In Islam, it does not present a solution to this problem of being cast out from God's presence. Muhammad tells us about paradise. It's a place filled with food and women and song and wine and all the things that our bodies could want, even things that are outside of the fence, as it were. And I've asked Muslims all over the world, will you be the same person in paradise as you are here? Does anything much change? Or is it just your surroundings that change? And everyone tells me it's just their surroundings. So that miserable uncle of mine is going to be the same miserable person in paradise, except he will have all these distractions, and so hopefully he's happy there. That is very different from what Jesus teaches us. He tells us there'll be no sex in heaven. He tells us we'll be like the angel. That is because there's a huge difference between the Muslim paradise and the heaven that Jesus described. Heaven, for the followers of Jesus, is where God lives. God is inviting us into the very presence of God and into a restored Eden. That is what Christians believe. That is what Christianity teaches. But how can we go if we are these awful, miserable people? We're drawn to evil and to dark things. Listen, the Bible tells us that the followers of Jesus will be changed. In a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, we will be changed. And what the Bible calls the old man will be cast off, and the new man will take over. So we will be changed inside and in our minds, the renewing of our minds. This is what Christianity teaches. It's what it's all about. But being a follower of Jesus is not enough. It's not enough to just read the Gospels and agree with them. There's something deeper. In the last video, we had a look at the concept of blood sacrifice and substitutionary death. Let's review that for a moment. when Adam and Eve and all of mankind rebelled against God, we ended up in a position of shame before God. If you very badly shamed your family, it would probably result in you being cast out or possibly death. This is what the Bible teaches us. It says the wages of sin is death. And so you and I will die without seeing God. We will live our lives in this awful world full of rebellion and evil people under the judgment of God. And that is why there's so much suffering in the world today. That's why children are born with disabilities. It's not their fault specifically. They just happen to be born into this awful world which is under the judgment of God. And because you are in this terrible situation, you cannot rescue yourself. You can't go to God and state your case because he's barred the way. All the religions of the world fail here because they are simply trying to invent ways to deal with the situation. Maybe they say, oh, you're born and then you're reborn and then you're reborn or something. They all come up with different ways. Sometimes people come up with these. Sometimes Satan tricks people into thinking they have some special knowledge or they have invented here's something new, a new approach. New religions are invented all the time. But all religion fails because they're man-made religions. Because Satan has deluded somebody into thinking that they're hearing from God or this is some new truth. That is what makes it so hard to find truth. Jesus told us that the way to destruction, the way to hell, is very wide. But the way to truth is narrow and few find it. But he encouraged us to knock, to seek, to try to find. He said, you will find it if you seek it with all of your heart. That means going against the flow. That means being different from just about everybody else, being scorned at, being laughed at. It means accepting God's solution and not some other solutions. You see, we cannot help ourselves. There is nothing we can do to remove the shame and bring ourselves back into God's presence. But God makes a way. It is there for those who seek him and those who find it. It doesn't matter what label they have or what religion they're under. It only matters if they accept God's way over other ways. You see, only God can provide a way for our shame and our guilt and our fear to be removed. That is why Jesus is more than a prophet. When Jesus died, our shame was laid on him. That's why they beat him. That's why they spit on him. That's why they mocked him. He was taking our shame. That's why he hung naked on a cross. That is why the sky turned dark and why he cried out in agony, Elohi, Elohi, lema sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? He was crying out in agony as our guilt and our shame and our fears were all laid on him. And he took them to the grave. And there they are buried and dealt with. You see, only people who accept his death as a substitute for their shame and their guilt, only those people can claim the death and the shed blood of Jesus as their way to God. If you've accepted Jesus' death, if you've accepted his death on the cross for payment for your evil ways, then you're set free. It is something we experience partially here. It is something we experience in full when we die, when we are set free from this awful world, and in a moment we are changed in the twinkling of an eye. Islam asks you to become a slave of God and to work at your religion, pray more, give more, go on pilgrimage, do things. Islam tells you that when you die, the book that is written by the two angels will be judged on the weigh scales. But in the end, God can do whatever he pleases. This is not in the Bible. God does not have to decide whether to let you into heaven or not. That is already decided. It was decided back in the Garden of Eden when our ancestors rejected God. Judgment came on them and on all of us. No amount of praying, no amount of fasting or good works can ever do anything to get you into heaven. Judgment has already been passed. Every human being on the face of this earth is destined for hell unless they accept God's way. The only way out is to find the way of escape, and that comes through Jesus Christ. So, we started with the question, are not Islam and Christianity the same thing? As I've explained Christianity, I think if you are a Muslim, you will say, no, they're not the same. They're very different from each other. They're as different as the East is from the West. They're completely different. Islam tells us submit and try harder, work harder, pray more, memorize, do things. Jesus calls us to give up, stop trying, and accept his payment. There is redemption, but only through the blood of Jesus shed on the cross so many years ago. For thousands of years, people sacrificed animals, shedding blood, and looking forward to God's solution. And now, for the last 2,000 years, people have looked back to the blood shed on the cross as provision that was made for them. Unfortunately, there are so many people who do not want to live within the boundaries that God has made for us. Some of them even call themselves Christians, but they have not accepted the provision of Jesus' death, and they live in continued rebellion to him. Please do not reject Jesus because so many people use his name but still live in rebellion to God. How sad. There are lots of ways that we can compare the organized religions of Islam and Christianity. Maybe we might even say, oh, they're all very much the same. But this is not about organized religion. This is about you and your relationship with God. So to those who have written in and have stated that the three monotheistic religions are basically all the same, please reconsider your position. They are not the same. Most Muslims believe that Christians are probably going to hell. I discovered that in the Middle East. They said, you're on your way to hell. Did you know that the followers of Jesus believe that anyone who does not trust in the shed blood of Jesus is also going to hell? So Muslims say, you're going to hell. Christians, followers of Jesus, say, well, you're going to hell unless you accept. You see, there is no coming judgment to decide if you're good enough to go to heaven. That was already decided back in the Garden of Eden. You're not. So Islam is totally different from the teaching of Jesus. I hope this answers your question and explains the difference between the two faiths. So I've presented the archaeological evidence that I have gathered, and we can discuss it more in the Q&A videos that come up, and hopefully your emails keep coming in. Please send me emails with questions. I apologize to those I have not answered yet. I have about 140 emails, and I'm working my way down through the list, but people keep writing in, and so some are being answered and new ones are arriving. And so please accept my apology. I do read every email that comes, and I try to figure out and I try to answer back. And we'll deal with some of those because now we're getting lots of the same questions. Just like in this video, lots of people saying, what's the big deal? Aren't they all the same? And I've tried to answer that here. Now we're going to take those and deal with those in questions and answers and deal with that. And we'll also look at actual Qiblas and maybe some other videos along the way as I deal with critiques, people who have come along and criticized what I have said and tried to argue against it. There's some good answers that could be given there. So some new videos will be coming up over the next months. Now I'm Dan Gibson, and this has been another video in the series Archaeology and Islam.